Hello and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be taking a quick detour from our usual 2022 midterm election coverage and focusing in on ahead at the 2024 presidential election. We're going to mainly be looking at two articles, one from The Hill and one from Business Insider, neither of which are really good for incumbent President Joe Biden and his 2024 election prospects. First, we'll take a look at this headline. 71% of Americans don't want Joe Biden to run for re-election. And if we take a look further down in the article, 45% say it's because they think he's not a good president, while about a third of them zeroed in on his old age, and about a quarter of them just said it's time for a change. And likely that could also be due to the fact that many Democratic voters think that Biden is ineffective at fighting for the issues they care about. Obviously, last week we saw the overturning of Roe v. Wade. There's very little that President Biden can actually do about that on the federal level, given the court's ruling and effectively throwing out that right as a national right. And this has reverberating consequences on Democratic enthusiasm and obviously how voters view Joe Biden. If we take a look at the latest unfavorable ratings for Joe Biden, he's currently at 56% disapproval, 39% approval. And to put that into perspective, he's lower than Barack Obama at this point in his presidency by a decent amount. He's lower than Obama by about 7 points or so. And he's lower than Donald Trump by about 3 at this point in his presidency. And Donald Trump was one of the most unpopular presidents in American history, broadly speaking. I mean, he almost never had a favorability or approval rating that was above 50%. And most presidents can't really say the same, at least in the modern era. There's never been a president that has pulled that low before. Now, obviously, I use FiveThirtyEight because it is more leaning in the leftward direction. Joe Biden's unfavorable ratings are probably higher than this, but I highlight this because even in a best-case scenario for Joe Biden, he's still at 56% disapproval, and that's a pretty terrible number to be at, broadly speaking. Now, the Hill article goes on to mention a number of nuances in the respondents. 61% of those in this same poll said that Donald Trump shouldn't run for the White House in 2024, and 39% said that he should run. So really, a majority of voters from both Democratic and Republican backgrounds don't want Joe Biden or Donald Trump to be the choices in 2024. And a Business Insider article further draws out this point, in which 70% of Americans, according to this poll now, don't want Donald Trump or Joe Biden on the ballot in 2024. And this is interesting because both Biden and Donald Trump want to run for president again. They want a rematch. Donald Trump obviously has been very vocal about running again in 2024. He hasn't officially committed to it, although it's very hinted at in every rally and every public appearance he makes that he wants to run again. Joe Biden has said similar things, and there's been a number of Democrats now coming out and saying that they don't necessarily think that Joe Biden should run again in 2024 because looking at these unfavorables, looking at the state of the economy in the country, he'd be near guaranteed to lose at this rate. Now, obviously, Joe Biden's approval ratings could improve, but I think at this point, especially due to the polarization we're seeing at the country, I think it's very unlikely. Given the state of the economy right now, gas prices, inflation at all-time high, and, even from a left-wing perspective, many left-wing voters on the issue of abortion, as we talked about earlier, don't think Joe Biden's fighting hard enough on those things and ultimately don't want him to be their nominee. Now, I think it's very likely that if Joe Biden does run again in 2024, that some Democrat is going to primary him. It probably won't be successful, but I think somebody will step up to the plate because there's a decent amount of Democratic voters that want a stronger nominee for president. If we look back at the 2020 election, and we take a look at the three closest states, Georgia, Arizona, and Wisconsin, Joe Biden won all of them by less than 1 point. Taking a look at the electoral college map of 2024, if you flip all of these states just 1 point to the right, Donald Trump or whoever the Republican nominee is wins the presidency. And given the fact that Joe Biden was much more popular on election day back in 2020 than he is today in 2022, it's extremely likely, if not certain, Joe Biden would lose in 2024. Even against someone as unpopular as Donald Trump was, nationally speaking. If we even take a look at the RCP aggregate of polls, this is, again, nationally, this is the popular vote, this isn't even state by state. Joe Biden is down to Donald Trump by about 2 points. Donald Trump has a 1.8% lead in the aggregate of polls against Joe Biden nationwide. This really doesn't happen nationally in generic ballot polls for Republicans. Republicans almost always lose the generic ballot and popular vote in presidential elections nowadays. So the fact that Donald Trump is polling ahead of Joe Biden despite this is really bad news for the Democratic Party going ahead. Now, there are a number of contenders that could replace Joe Biden. Obviously you have a long list here. You have Pete Buttigieg, who ran back in 2020. Roy Cooper could be a potential pick. Obviously, Kamala Harris is probably the front runner if Joe Biden decides not to run, although I think most Democratic insiders and voters alike think that she would be a pretty poor choice as a nominee. She's not a very charismatic person. She has unfavorables nearly as high as Biden. If I were the Democratic Party, I would nominate somebody like Raphael Warnock or somebody like Jared Polis, which I think are both candidates that have much more crossover appeal, and I think they have a better record to run on than these other Democrats. Obviously, if Kamala Harris runs, she's going to have to deal with all of the baggage of the Biden administration when running against Republicans. Andrew Cuomo, I don't think would run. He's, now a disgraced governor out of New York, resigned in disgrace over the sexual harassment allegations that he faced, as well as the nursing home disaster during the COVID crisis. So really, not exactly a strong field of Democrats here. I think Raphael Warnock and Jared Polis, who isn't even on this list, but I think those two Democrats are probably the strongest candidates to run. Roy Cooper, I think, comes in at a third. But really, any of these other nominees, Gina Raimondo, I don't really know how she'd perform in a national environment. I think Bernie Sanders is too old. So there's a number of Democrats on here already that I don't think are going to capture the American electorate as a whole. Nonetheless, even get through a primary. Most of these Democrats here I don't even think would get through a primary. Cuomo, obviously Buttigieg has struggled, especially in the deep southern states in the Democratic primaries, to really gain any traction. So I think Raphael Warnock already off the bat probably has that strength, and I'll make a more detailed video on the 2024 Democratic primaries if Joe Biden doesn't run, because I do have a lot more to say about that, but I think Warnock and Polis are probably the strongest nominees for the Democrats. Now, this video is mostly focused on Biden and the Democrats, so I'm not really going to get into the Republican primary field. I'll talk about that again in a separate video, and that's mainly why this video was made, to kind of convey that point, that Joe Biden is probably a weak nominee to run in 2024. But looking at the rest of the Democratic primary field, I don't think many of these candidates are particularly strong general election candidates either. Perhaps Gretchen Whitmer, if she wins in 2022, could also be a strong candidate. But most of these candidates, Jay Inslee, Amy Klobuchar, AOC, obviously, Bernie Sanders, I don't think they're really going to win over a national electorate in a general election, nor do I think they're going to do well in the primaries to begin with. Joe Biden really shouldn't run for re-election. I think if you're a Democrat, you probably should look at other candidates potentially to support. But if the DNC does get behind Biden or Kamala Harris, they're going to be the nominees. They obviously have a large sway on who the nominee is. We saw that back in 2016. We saw that in 2020. Joe Biden could potentially be primaried from his left by somebody like AOC or Bernie Sanders, but I don't really think those primary challenges are really going to go anywhere. Obviously, Bernie Sanders is even older than Joe Biden, so if age is a concern of most voters, he certainly shouldn't be running again for president. But overall, even if another Democrat does run, based on these generic ballot numbers from RCP, the fact that Republicans are up by 2, they're likely to do very well in the midterms. Whoever the Democratic nominee... Whoa, a lot of thunder going on right now. Whoever the Democratic nominee is likely going to have an uphill battle trying to get any legislation passed in 2024. They're almost certainly going to have a Republican House and potentially could have a Republican Senate as well. So overall, 2024 at this point in time is not looking good for the Democrats. Perhaps if the economy improves, another Democrat steps up to the plate and Joe Biden's not the nominee, their fortunes can change. But that doesn't necessarily mean this is good news for Donald Trump and the Republicans. And we'll talk about that in a separate video as a whole, because I think Donald Trump has his own set of problems and baggage that would make him a pretty poor general election candidate in 2024. So anyway, guys, thank you all for watching this video. If you enjoyed, please subscribe if you haven't already. Like this video down below. And again, thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.